Gabby Jimenez of the Hospice Heart and social worker Lisa Pahl of the Death Deck are back with us today for this next episode in our series on grief. We're talking about how to manage grief when you're a caregiver for someone else. You're listening to Heartbeat from the Heart of Hospice. I'm Jerry Fenter, here with Helen Bauer.
Whether you're a family caregiver or an end-of-life professional, we're here to enhance your hospice experience by connecting you with information you can use about end-of-life care. Because we know how busy life can get, Heartbeat is designed to give you helpful information in a bite-sized format.
Today we're continuing our series on grief, talking with Gabby Jimenez and Lisa Pahl. Gabby is with the hospiceheart.net and Lisa is with the Death Deck. And today we're talking about grieving one person while still caring for another person. So Gabby, why don't you tell us more about this and kind of lead our discussion today?
Hi, Lisa. Thank you so much for being here today and for taking your time to help us navigate grief and the different colors that it has in our life. Today, we're talking about grieving one person while caring for another. That in itself is difficult because here we've lost someone we love, and now we're caring for someone else who could quite possibly be dying as well. And that's one set of questions that I have. But then I also kind of want to add to this. I have a woman that I know who was caring for her husband, and he was dying. He was in his 90s, so the timing was appropriate. And as she was caring for him, as he was getting closer, her daughter became ill. And it happened very quickly. And we actually wonder if it might have been COVID. It all happened so fast. And on the night that her husband took his last breath, so did her daughter. So now she's grieving two deaths at once. And which that in itself is just painful. And I have known her for several years now and watched her go through this. And it's just difficult. And I'm finding myself at a loss of words to help comfort her for both losses. And then you have someone who has cared for someone, lost someone, cared for someone else and lost them. And now they're trying to navigate those griefs, which are also very different. How do they grieve one person while caring for or grieving another at the same time? I mean, that is just, you've used the word messy before. This is so messy. And we've got accumulative grief. What do we do with that?
In this current moment with COVID, we've seen many more of these multiple losses because family members have often lost multiple members of their family at once. And so I think as a society, we're experiencing this more than we have in the past. And I think we're still kind of learning, to be quite honest, how to best support people with these numerous losses at once. So I'll start by saying that in general, grief is so unique for each person, and the grief that we experience for each loss is so unique. And so I think that it can be hard to even wrap our head around how to grieve multiple people at once. I'm currently doing it myself, and I in some ways feel like I'm not grieving anybody because there's too much to grieve. What I think we can do to help is to, as we've talked about in our previous segment, and I think that is always important to just remind people that there's nothing magical that you can say, Gabby, to this person. There's listening, there's showing up for this person, continuing to check in, letting them know that you're there and that you care about them, giving them space to talk about their loved ones. This to me is one of the biggest gifts that we can give someone that we're trying to support is to just allow that person to share stories, to talk about their feelings, to be a person that will sit with their grief. So those are some beginning things to do. As well, when we think about how do you caregive, how do you take care of someone when you're experiencing your own grief? one of the things I think is important to ask is, do you need to be the person caregiving? Are there other people who can help kind of step into that role? Can you ask for more help so that some of that burden is taken off of you and shared? For me personally, I have realized that I probably rushed into a role of caregiving to kind of avoid my own grief. And I hear other people, talking about that. It's and in my experience working with people, and I kind of knew I was doing it as I was doing it because I have worked in this field and kind of said, oh, might you be doing this? But I felt compelled and I wanted to be helpful again. And I also just wanted to think about something other than my grief. So my question that now I ask myself is, do I need to be that person to take on this major caregiving role? So if you have the capacity to share that with someone and to take some of that off of yourself and allow yourself space to heal, I would really encourage that.
We're excited to share a great educational opportunity with you. The California Hospice and Palliative Care Association is holding its annual conference coming up in June of 2022. It's going to be on the beautiful campus of Chapman University in Orange, California. The conference starts with an LNEC communication curriculum on Monday and Tuesday, June 6th and 7th, followed by the annual conference and exposition Wednesday through Friday, June 8th through the 10th. The theme for this year's conference is Back to the Basics at the Bedside. You'll hear information on the basic principles of the pillars of quality hospice care taught by experts in the end-of-life industry. This is a great opportunity to get those continuing education units and to reset your focus on what's really important in patient care. Early registration is open until April 1st, so visit the CHAPCA website at calhospice.org to register and tell them you heard about it on the Heart of Hospice podcast.
As I'm listening to you talk, I think about the work that we do, all of us here today, that's what we do. We take care of people. And I think about, when we lose someone in our own personal private life, and then we go and we knock on the door of someone, a patient or a family member, and we walk in and we try to support them and we sort of tuck away our grief, our personal grief, because we're present for another. And that just piles up. That isn't healthy either. But I wonder, as just somebody who knows somebody, like let's say we have a friend who is just lost her mother, but is caring for her father. Maybe we could, we can't fix that. And I think that's the thing we have to remove from our makeup. That is something we cannot do. We can listen, we can be there, we can offer support. But I think, what could I do for someone who's going through that? And I think what I'd like to do is just maybe offer an hour to sit with your father while you go take a walk outside. Because I think it's important that we are mindful that this person who is grieving also needs to practice self-care. They are struggling. And maybe we could do something like that. I mean, is that helpful?
Yeah, I think the more specific we can be in what we offer people when they're grieving is really helpful. Saying to somebody, let me know if you need anything, is a nice thing, a nice gesture. But the person often doesn't even know what they might need. And it might feel too overwhelming. So I encourage people to offer something specific. Like you said, Gabby, can I come sit with your dad for an hour? Or I'm running to the grocery store. Can I pick up anything for you? Can I babysit your kids for a couple hours to give you a break? Tangible, specific things can feel really helpful. And I think a lot of bereavement support groups are online now. And so that's a way that people who are grieving can still get support while they're caregiving. And so I encourage people, if a grief support group is something that might be helpful, as someone that you care about them, you can say, or even you can do some of the legwork to figure out, what is in their area that they can connect with in terms of grief support. And for many people in grief, and especially when they're caregiving, finding some structure and routine can be really helpful. life can feel really, really messy and out of control, especially after you've lost somebody. I've found for myself and pretty consistently that finding that routine again, and whether that's, if you're caregiving, it's, okay, every morning I get my dad up at 8:00 and we do this, we get him his breakfast and his pills and then this, and having that structure can kind of ease and calm our feelings of being out of control.
Oh, this is so good. I appreciate all of this so much. I think that I love the idea of giving something specific, because I am one of those people that say, if you need anything, call me. But most people are not going to call you. And when you say, do you need anything? The answer is most likely going to be no. But at the end of the day, most of those people who say no really do need something. And it's hard to figure out what that is, but maybe we have to learn better to be a little more specific. Can I come by for an hour? Can I bring you some food? Instead of saying I don't know, instead of saying I'm going to the store, what if you say, would you like some soup? I know some great soup. Because I think it's hard to make decisions when you are struggling that deeply. So if we can take some of that responsibility off of them, it allows them to be a little bit more present with what they're experiencing. But it's just heavy. I think of grief, and I've said this before in some of my other things, is that I think of grief as like wearing a jacket with a lot of pockets, right? And all of those pockets are filled with mud. And while you're walking around, the mud is so heavy. And we know that we could empty the mud out of the pockets. And that would make the jacket a little easier to wear. But how do we empty the mud out of the pockets? And that's our role as someone who loves someone who's grieving, is helping them, with sort of a shovel of sorts, which is a gesture, offering time, offering food, and reducing some of the mud in the pockets. Does that make sense?
That's a great visual. I'm picturing, flinging the mud a little bit, off your fingers. And it's a great visual because, as we said, grief is messy and complicated. I think the more we learn about grief, the more we realize that it is all encompassing. When someone is in the thick of grief, especially a new grief, it feels impossible sometimes to just even make it through the day. And so, I encourage people to cut down the day into an hour. What am I going to do during this next hour? And I find this especially with widows who have been married a long time. It just, the day feels so endless sometimes. And so it's kind of like, okay, again, going back to that structure, but also just, you don't even have to think about making it to dinner tonight. Just make it to the next hour. A couple more things that I think can be helpful is, even in grief, there can be space for humor. And I think we sometimes get a little cautious with people, and you definitely have to test the waters and how well you know someone and those sorts of things when you're using humor with someone who's grieving. But, finding playfulness and levity, and, I have friends when I've gone through hard times who send me, funny memes and things that they know will just brighten me up, or for me, little kitten videos and things like that. And so I think it takes, as a culture and individually, it takes us just being a little creative, and you test it out. And, if the person's kind of doesn't respond, then it's kind of like, oh, okay, maybe not that one, maybe not that approach. And you kind of just pivot. But humor and levity and playfulness, these are important to help bring us out sometimes of our heads and out of our intense grief.
I think we could probably talk about this over and over for hours and hours, but this was really good. Thank you so much, Lisa. And I truly hope our listeners have a lot of takeaways and know that they are not alone. And that, like you say, grief is messy. It's hard work. The pockets are filled with mud. Just dig your fingers in and start just emptying it, and little by little. and just as a community support one another. And if you know someone who is struggling with one loss while caring for someone else, or two losses, close together, to just reach out and just follow their lead a little bit and listen and be there and offer support.
That's a great summary, Gabby.
Yeah, this has been very, very good. I have to tell you, as I'm listening to you, I can think of one particular person that I have known who experienced probably both of these scenarios herself. She was caring for both her husband, who had cancer, and her mom, who had dementia. As time went by, her husband died first. And so she's grieving the loss of her husband while still caring for her mother. And she had been a caregiver all of her life. She explained that, for years, even since she was a young woman, she had been caring for people. And then her mother died. And all of a sudden, she's grieving the loss of her husband, grieving the loss of her mother, and no one left to provide any caregiving experience for her. She was totally lost at that point. And so what you've explained today, what some of the tips that you offered today, would be very helpful for her and would be very helpful to some of our listeners who are hospice providers. These are ways that we can help people. And so, Lisa and Gabby, thank you so much for providing this information and giving us some things to think about. So to all of our listeners, we want to say again our thanks to Gabby Jimenez from the Hospice Heart. You can learn more about her and read her blog, thehospiceheart.net. And also to Lisa Pahl, who's the other half of the Death Deck ladies. Her and Lori Locicero have created the Death Deck, and we would encourage you to check that out also at thedeathdeck.com and find out more about what they are offering at the Death Deck. So to Gabby and Lisa, again, thank you so much for being a part of this grief series. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry and Helen.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Thanks for listening to Heartbeat from the Heart of Hospice. I'm Helen Bauer here with Jerry Fenter. Because we know your hospice journey is 24/7, you can always find us at theheartofhospice.com. Subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening, and please take a minute to leave a rating or a review on Apple Podcasts.
If you'd like to connect with us, you can send us an email to host@theheartofhospice.com. You can also find us on social media. And remember, no matter who you are or where you are in your hospice journey, you are the heart of hospice.